Thank you to Lisa for this video idea. Every funnel endurance event from 2016 to 2024. Let's start things off with the 2016 Hublino tournament, where the event was not called funnel endurance, but funnel spinning. It would consist of 10 orange funnels, and there was no heats during this time, so it was all 8 teams competing. The Ruby Rollers, who were in the lead at some point and were doing really well, they fell down the order pretty quick and would find themselves in last. For Team Phoenix, they didn't really stand a chance and would end up finishing in second to last. The Green Gang were in a tight battle with the Valiant Valence, but would ultimately fall short and finish in 6th. For the Valiant Valence, they were on the verge of finishing in the bottom half, but they did just enough with a pretty good move to get by the Blue Fastics to take 4th, while the Blue Fastics themselves would take 5th. It would be down to the Golden Wisps, Blackjacks, and Minty Maniacs. This battle would be down to the wire, and things would look up for the Golden Wisps, as they would be the last to enter the final funnel prior to the Blackjacks and Minties entering. Unfortunately, they miscalculated their rolls and would end up running out of time, leading to them taking bronze. It would be down to the Minties and Jacks. It would be a pretty close battle, but in the end, the Minties would take silver, while the Blackjacks would take gold in funnel spinning. The 2017 Marble League qualifiers would have funnel spin, in which there would be 6 orange funnels instead of 10. I won't really go too into depth about what happened during qualifiers, but I'll tell you what you need to know. Snow of the Snowballs and Cerulean of the Cobalts, 2 members of teams that were in the safe zone before this event, finished with rather poor results, while Waspy of the Midnight Wisps and Argent of the Quicksilvers would not only do good enough, but win their respective heats, they would do enough to qualify for 2017. And as for 2017, the league would kick itself off with Funnel Race, which is kind of ironic considering it's not really a race. The main league would feature 9 orange funnels as opposed to the 6 we saw in qualifiers. The first heat was up, and there would be some notable changes to how the teams would perform. Waspy of the Midnight Wisps, who won this event in qualifiers, would take second to last in their heat, while Mary of Team Primary, who didn't compete in this event during qualifiers, it was Primistet and they took last. They would win their heat and advance to the final. The other safe teams would consist of Team Momo, Oceanics, and Rangers, while the eliminated teams would consist of also the Jungle Jumpers, Lambers, and Maliello, who has a bad history with funnel endurance events. The second heat, however, will be off to a rather comedical start, as 3 of the 8 marbles would have a false start and would have to redo the run. There would be many changes back and forth, and the Thunderbolts would be one of the first teams to enter the last funnel. And every time it looks like their representative Bolto is about to go out and get eliminated in the heats, they just somehow find a way. They will let their endurance show and hope for 4 of their marbles to make a mistake, into which those 4 marbles were Candy, Argent, Shimmer, and Pulsar. It will be a tight battle between Pinky Toe of the Pinkies, Wizzy of the Savage Speeders, and Mocha of the Chocolatiers. As for who would come out on top in the second heat, that would belong to Mocha. As for the final, Moto would find themselves after a pretty good start early, being in second, battling with Mary. As time would progress, they would find themselves falling down the order pretty quick, but unfortunately, they couldn't restore that magic that they'd had in the first heat, settling for 8th place. It would be a tight battle between 4 marbles. Kinoa would finish in 7th, while Mocha, the winner of the second group, would finish in 6th. And with Mo 3 and Wizzy dropping quick for 4th and 5th respectively, our opponent would consist of Pinky Toe, Mary, and Aqua. As Pinky Toe falls through the final funnel to take 3rd, it would be looking like Mary is about to take silver while Aqua takes gold. Fortunately for Mary, they save up their endurance for the final funnel, and Aqua makes a crucial mistake, which would cause them to slip to second, and Mary would win the first event of the league for Team Primary. There was no funnel endurance in the 2018 Winter Marble League, so let's take it back to the Hublino tournament for 2018, where there was a funnel endurance event. And like 2016, it would consist of all 8 teams in 1 heat, and for the funnels itself, it would consist of 13 funnels this time instead of 10. The Green Gang, they stood no chance. They would easily take last out of the 8 teams. They would finish behind the next team by nearly 20 seconds. That team would be the Golden Orbs, who didn't fare too well either. The Bumblebees, who were running decent for most of this event and looked like they were going to finish in the top half, suddenly fell through pretty quick and would end up finishing in 6th, while the Blue Fastics would once again finish in 5th. The Ruby Rollers, however, would improve from the 2016 funnel endurance and would finish in 4th this time. The podium would consist of the Valiant Violets, the Minty Maniacs again, and the Blackjacks once again. The Valiant Violets looked like they were in pretty good position to win the event, but due to quick drops in funnels 11 and 12, the Valiant Violets would find themselves in 3rd, which they would finish at. The battle for 1st would be very close, but just like 2016, the Minties would come away with a silver while the Blackjacks had a phenomenal run. They would enter the penultimate funnel before reaching the 2-minute mark and would last there for over a minute. If you want to know about the definition of endurance, this would be it right here. The Blackjacks never gave up on this part, and they did what they did to win the gold. And they did it by a pretty good margin too. For the 2019 qualifiers, the first event would be Funnel Spin, which would feature 8 orange funnels. The first heat didn't feature too much, except for Mellow Yellow having the usual struggles, the Cobalts having a bad time, Mocha doing Mocha things, Mallard of the Nugs and Indy of the Stars making solid first impressions, and Green Eye of the Crazy Cat's Eyes winning the heat. For the second heat, it would also be interesting. The Limers were in the lead at some point, that's surprising. Razzie, who was also doing well at one point, dropped through the funnels fast and finished in last in the heat. Lemon Lime going from lead to mediocre finish, future coach Hazy showing their skills, Clutter winning the heat, and Greg Woods referring to Balls of Chaos as Team Galactic.
And it will be Team Galactic that wins.
As for the 2019 main league, this would be the second event of the year, and we would get off to a hot start as in the first heat, Clementine of the Rangers gets stuck, causing them to DNF and finishing last by default. Despite doing well in qualifiers, Mocha was not selected to partake in the main league. They instead chose Bonbon, who didn't really do much and got out early. Indigo Stars representative Indy, who did well during qualifiers, they also had a below average finish and would go out early too. Pinky Panther of the Pinkies went out next, and for the Balls of Chaos, while they were the 4th team to drop through the last funnel, they would still advance because of Clementine's DNF. Savage Speeders had a pretty good lead at some point, but eventually dropped through and finished 3rd in the heat. Fortunately, it didn't matter too much as the other teams dropped out earlier. Team Galactic would do pretty well too, and the Hazers would end up winning the heat. And as I look at the second heat, I just noticed something different. Despite winning their heats and qualifiers, Green Eye of the Crazy Cat's Eyes was not selected to partake in this event during the main league. They instead chose Yellow Eye, and that went about as expected. There was also 12 orange funnels as opposed to the 8 in qualifiers. The Razzies, who underperformed in this event during qualifiers, they were looking to be in danger as they were the first out of the 8 marbles to reach the 9th funnel. Fortunately for them, they showed their endurance and managed to stay there and even take the lead at some point. As for who got eliminated, Aqua would show why they're no longer a member of the Oceanics, Yellow Eye showing why they should have kept Green Eye instead, Westby of the Midnight Wisp, who was doing good at some point but just couldn't keep up at that time. And for Yellow of Mellow Yellow, they were leading at some point and were looking like they were going to win the heat. They somehow managed to collapse and be the last team eliminated in Heat B, making that another finals event where they finished in the bottom half. Those that would advance are Leap of the Jungle Jumpers, Shock of the Thunderbolts, Mallard of the Green Nugs, and Razzie with a 17-second victory over Mallard. They would win the heat. The final heat would come up and there would be quite an amount of lead changes. From the Thunderbolts and Jungle Jumpers having the lead, to the Raspberry Racers, to the Hazers, to the Savage Speeders, and such. It felt unpredictable for most of the event. Razzie of the Raspberry Racers reached the final funnel first and were looking to be in trouble, but that's when they would show their endurance skills once again. They would get there around the 1:30 mark and will last in the final funnel for over 30 seconds, managing to outlast 6 other marbles. Foggy, who was battling Speedy for first at some points, they would fall short but would still do good enough for a bronze. It would now come down to Razzie versus Speedy. For the Razzies, their final magic will run out as Razzie runs out of steam while Speedy claims the gold. This event would also be in the 2019 Showdown, where it will consist of 6 teams per heat, the top 3 advancing. Like qualifiers, the Limers had the early lead going into this event. but unfortunately, they would do usual alignment of things, slip through the funnels pretty quickly, and would eventually find themselves finishing in last of not just the heat, but the entire event. Sugar of the Jawbreakers and Meeple of the Kobolds didn't do themselves any better, and they were also eliminated, leaving Minty Swirl of the Minties, Rojo Dos of the Rojo Rollers, and Snow of the Snowballs to advance, the last of the three redeeming themselves from 2017 and winning the heat. The second heat, however, would be different. Mo and Dash, who were leading on pretty early and even at the middle point of this heat, they would unfortunately find themselves falling out of the order pretty fast, with Mo taking last and Dash taking second to last in the heat. The last elimination of the group would be Mary from Team Primary, who took gold in this event 2 years prior. Shiny of the Shiny Swarm, who entered the final funnel first, would do just enough to survive and advance onto the final, alongside the Hornets and Bumblebees, who were rivals at the time. The final heat, however, would go great for some teams, but not so great for other teams, like the Shiny Swarm and the Hornets. The Shiny Swarm, they just had a bad time for the entire final run. They would fall through the funnels pretty quick in comparison to most of the marbles. In terms of how Stinger performed, they were in rather decent position before falling down the order pretty quick as well. Shiny was about to take 6th before Stinger interrupted them, causing them to finish in 5th, while Stinger takes 6th. The final 4, however, would be pretty close. The Minties were the first out of the 4 to reach the final funnel, but the Bumblebees make an error, causing the Minties to stay in for longer while the Bees themselves take 4th. Rojo Dos will do the same thing and take 3rd, while for Snow, well, it looks like they were going to win this event with ease. They would find themselves in a tight battle in the final funnel with Minty Swirl. Fortunately for Snow, they would do just enough to take gold, while Minty Swirl takes silver. For 2020, although it would make sense to include the Black Hole funnel since it's technically a funnel endurance type of event, I'm not going to do that. Only funnel endurance. Now on to the 2020 qualifiers. For 2020, the funnels will look entirely different as compared to the other years. It would not only consist of 5 orange funnels, but 5 green funnels as well. There would also be a ball bearing to help marbles that get stuck just in case another Clementine situation happens. For the first heat, it would go well for marbles like Kinowin and Mo, the latter of who would end up winning the event by a pretty good margin too. Meanwhile, marbles like Diego, Westby, and Mary would have a rough time. Most notably Mary, who won the event 3 years prior and is now falling apart in this event. The second heat and qualifiers would be different. There would be some nice battles back and forth, but that would all be overshadowed when Leap of the Jungle Jumpers fell off the track. And since this was considered a track defect, the Jungle Jumpers would receive 2 points because of it. As for how the rest of the marbles would perform, the Pinkies would do bad, Meliola would have yet another bad funnels performance, and there would be a 6 marble battle in the final funnel, and ultimately which would be won by Anarchy of the Balls of Chaos. This would be the 3rd event during the 2020 Marble League, and in the first heat, there will be some notable starts. Wizzy of the Savage Spears would get off to a bit of a slow start, while marbles like Yellup, Astron, and Ducky would get off to rather good starts. And for Yellup, you know how this will go for them. As for how the heat would go, marbles would jostle back and forth for the lead and the top 4 spot. It would be a pretty tight battle in the final funnel. Mo, who won this event during the 2020 qualifiers, would be the first one out in their heat. The second one would be Yellup of Mellow, leaving them with yet another bottom half funnel endurance finish. Joining them would be Astron of Team Galactic and Aqua of the Oceanics. Wizzy would do just enough to advance, while Ducky on the other hand would win the heat and would advance alongside Minty Drizzle and Honey. Let's take things over to Heat 2 and let's see how things will go from there. Heat B would feature constant back and forth battles, many lead changes, and it looked like no lead was safe from any of these marbles. At one moment, a certain marble is in first, and in another moment, that same marble falls to last pretty quickly, that type of thing. It would be a down-to-the-wire battle in the final heat featuring all 8 marbles. The marbles that would not make it would be Vespa of the Hornets, Westby of the Midnight Wisps, who has truly fallen from grace in terms of funnel endurance, Smoggy of the Hazers, and Rezi of the Raspberry Racers. Shock, Clutter, and Cyanide would advance, while Kinowin of the Orangers would win the heat. It would all come down to the final heat of this event, and much like the second heat, it would be constant lead changes and back and forth battles between these marbles. Cyanide will be the first to enter the green funnels, but will hold on for long enough to where most marbles would pass them and they would be in good position of a podium. The speeders were also in the lead at some points, but would get caught up in the battle as well. It would be a very close battle heading into the final few funnels, and Cyanide of the Crazy Cat's Eyes would be in the lead prior to entering the final funnel. As for how it would go down, Shock would finish in 8th, then comes Honey. Cyanide, who was in the lead before the final funnel, would finish in 6th. Then would come Clutter and Ducky finishing 5th and 4th respectively, leaving our podium to be Wizzy taking bronze, Kinnowin taking silver, and Minty Drizzle winning gold in 2020. Minty still got it in these types of events. This event would also be featured in a tournament called Last Marble Standing, where it would feature 6 teams. And in this type of tournament, all 6 teams would do 2 separate heats of this event. It would consist of 12 orange funnels for this one. Milky Madness didn't really fare too well, while teams like Team Purity and the Semi-Skimmers also finished bottom half in the first heat. Dairy Dash would do decent with a 3rd place finish, while the Freshers, who looked like they were going to win the heat, would end up losing out at the last second to Grace of Glory. For the second heat, Milky Madness would get off to a rather slow start. While some marbles would be battling for the lead, Milky Madness would be in a bad state. With how things were looking for Milky Madness, it would look like they were going to finish in last once again. Just as it would look like they were going to drop down yet another funnel out in last, the Semi-Skimmers would cut them off, and Milky Madness would maintain their momentum. For the Freshers, they went from almost winning the first heat to dropping out first in the second heat in a pretty close battle. In a down to the wire battle with the rest of the marbles, the Grace of Glory would finish in 5th, Dairy Dash taking 4th, and the Semi-Skimmers would finish in 3rd. While it would look like Milky Madness are going to pull off an amazing turnaround from the first heat to the second, they will lose out all of their momentum in the final moments to Team Purity, who will be the winners of the heat. And unfortunately for Milky Madness, it would not be enough for them as they would still finish in last overall, while the podium would consist of Dairy Dash in 3rd, Team Purity in 2nd, and Grace of Glory in 1st. And for how long this video is going on, I'll just cut this into 2 parts. I'll kick the second part off with the 2021 Final Endurance and Qualifiers. And I would like to once again thank Lisa for recommending me this video idea. I'll see you when I get there. Peace.